Good afternoon. I'm very happy to see so many here today and from so different departments and institutes. Briefly about what I'm going to talk today, mainly sea ice and quite a few aspects of it. I'd like to begin by showing how the sea ice has been changing in the last 40 years. 40 years because we have so-called passive microwave satellite images from that period, which is a continuous homogeneous time series. And so on the x-axis you have the day of year, on the y-axis you have amount of sea ice, and here color-coded you have every single year plotted for the last 40 years. And this is a figure from the Cryosphere Today, University of Illinois, but it is also based on the National Snow and Ice Data Center, and which collects sea ice information from various sources. And it's quite striking. You can see the beginning with the year 79, coming to 2014, beginning with blue, coming to pink, red, and then the current year is yellow. And you might see that the changes are quite striking, how the ice concentration and ice extent has been decreasing, especially in the summertime. So basically this is the summertime here, and that is the wintertime. You have a seasonal variability, and in the last 10 years or even less you have great changes. Massive changes, not fantastic changes. So the word great is a bit tricky. And it's quite interesting to, if you look at the red line here, which is the year 2013, I'm sure some of you heard that some climate skeptics saying, well, surely it's not a problem now, the sea ice diminishing, because you have such a massive jump from the year 2012, which is true, and when you look at the percentage, but the trend is all the same. The sea ice is decreasing. And it's also interesting to look at this graph allows you to compare it from day-to-day basis, and you see this year 2014, the yellow line there, you can see for a few days then that year was a minimum, absolute minimum for this period, but it's becoming slightly better. There seems to be a slight trend of delaying the seasons as well. I don't know if that's going to continue or not. So the ice minimum seems to be becoming slightly later in the year. But this is how it looked a couple of days ago. And if we look at the Greenland Sea here, this is again based on passive microwave images. Just to, if you look at the ice here between Iceland and Greenland, you see there's not a lot. And just for comparison, this is a map from the Danish Met Institute. This is in 1898, showing the ice in April. And here is a graph or figure that was published in 1917 and based on 30 years data sets. So that was showing the average conditions in April, maximum conditions, and minimum. So I know it's a long time ago, but it's on a geological timescale. It's not that long actually, but there you go. Another kind of sign of the changing times. This is from a Danish artist, and the text in Danish says, whilst the south and west coast, affected by a branch of the Gulf Stream, are most of the time free of ice, the cold polar currents cause the north and east coast to be blocked by sea ice almost every year, sometimes until the month of July. So, but to summarize things up regarding the changes of the sea ice and icebergs, all the trends show that the ice extent is decreasing, and there's still great variability between both regions and years and even seasons. There's much less multi-year ice, which is an ice that has survived one summer, and the ice field as a whole is becoming thinner, which causes certain difficulties, which I will try to get into. One of them being that the ice is more affected by wind, so you get more variability because of that. More icebergs, certainly in the Greenland Sea, are likely, and but not necessarily larger, but definitely the trend seems to be that we'll be getting more icebergs. And in a way, it is a bit difficult with the icebergs, not the big ones that you can see easily, but when you have smaller parts of them breaking off, which is difficult for some of the ships to see in radar. So that can also cause danger. And like Gisle mentioned, there will also be more wave activity with because the sea ice tends to kind of dampen the waves. Less ice you have, you especially over big regions, then big waves might become, or will probably become, a bigger problem. Now, when you add the ice and icebergs to the population and what people are doing, then what kind of dangers does this cause? Obviously, there is direct impact to navigation, the danger of collision with sea ice and icebergs. All variability tends to be difficult. People seem to want to have some kind of regularity, know what to expect. And finding sea ice or icebergs in unusual regions is becoming, I guess, more possible now that we have this big variability. And also, the main cause of problem is that there's much more activity going on, both with tourism, but also oil and gas industry and all kinds of mining industry. So, Anna mentioned calving icebergs, but they are also dangerous when they are just turning, and both with direct collision, but also with the so-called iceberg tsunamis that they can cause, and have definitely caused casualties in the past. Now, what used to be more of a problem in the past, but will not cease to be so, is with the ships that seek shelter within the ice field. For example, when big storms are passing, this has happened in the Greenland Sea quite a lot. Some of the ships try to seek shelter from the waves within the ice pack, and some of them were caught and crushed in the past. Now this can also become more hazardous when we are getting this increased potential storminess and waves, that ships will try to do this, and maybe the ships that are not prepared as well for ice as you would hope for. And there's also increased risk for hunters traveling on the ice, and both hunters obviously and also people, tourists or other people that are traveling in these regions, both because over a long time where the ice is just thinning and becoming less reliable, but also when you have sudden onset of ice breakup. And this has already been observed in Scoresbysund in East Greenland, and there are also examples of this when you have unusual ice conditions, for example in fjords, with many years apart, then some local knowledge of how to read the signs. For example, in Eyjafjörð in North Iceland, my mother's generation knew very well that if they were out playing on the ice and the wind turned easterly, they should get onto the shore as soon as possible, because in that condition the ice would break up very rapidly. Now, of course, even if we have climate change and all that, of course you can still get fjord ice, especially if you have a fresh surface layer. So, but with this happening more and more years apart, then knowledge like this can get lost. And also a few years ago we had some very kind of scattered ice coming into the West Fjords, and immediately kids were out there playing and maybe not knowing as well as previous generations that these ice flows can tilt and all that. Now there's potential danger with if you have oil spills within the sea ice region. It's much more difficult to clean it up, and also this oil will stay longer. It'll take longer to break up with the cold waters, and we have had also problems with some of the drifting stations breaking up earlier than expected when people are situated on the ice to do all kinds of measurements, and this is of course not a complete list of all the potential dangers that sea ice or icebergs can cause. Now Anna showed quite clearly how the need for improved ice charts and information about bathymetry when the sea ice is kind of going away from or disappearing from certain regions. There is a very great need for improved charts and to prevent ships in running aground. Now I'd like to introduce a group that myself and Thor Jakobsson have been a part of, and Björn Erlingsson as well, for a number of years, the International Ice Charting Working Group. And this is a very informal, in a way, collaboration between all the main ice centers in the world. And last autumn we had a conference here in Reykjavik, and I'd like to mention some of the kind of results. It's a group that uses satellite images quite heavily and for ice monitoring and research, and there's a very strong link between the users of sea ice information and it's also connected to people to designing satellites and sensors and researchers trying to improve all kinds of algorithms to try to interpret the satellite images better. Now, this group produced a press release by the end of the meeting, and I'd like to read two quotes, or maybe you've read through them already. But while the extent of the Arctic ice pack rebounded somewhat this year from the record minimum set in 2012, this should not be taken as a sign that the trend of diminishing Arctic sea ice has stopped. This is an illustration of the extreme interannual variability that is to be expected. The long-term trend remains towards seasonally ice-free Arctic Ocean. And more precisely, less ice does not mean less danger. The large variability in local sea ice conditions from year to year, from region to region, presents major hazards for shipping and other offshore activity. And I'd like to also, if I have time, a little bit of time, to mention some of the examples. The tanker Nordvik entered Matisen Strait in Russia's northern sea route without permission due to its insufficient ice class and was hauled by ice. There was luckily no pollution. Some 35 adventurers attempting to cross the Northwest Passage in a variety of yachts and smaller boats were surprised by locally difficult ice conditions, causing some to abandon their attempt. And I should also mention that even if the Arctic sea ice has been decreasing, the Antarctic sea ice region has been showing exactly the opposite for the same period. I think in the probably few seconds I have remaining, or hopefully, I'd like to stress that there is, of course, great need for cooperation, and just showing how many showed up here today is a good sign, I guess. Research and monitoring, and I'd like to mention that even if the satellite images are getting better and better, of course there's no way of warning people of all ice, of all hazards. And I'm slightly worried that there will be pressure to change some of the legislation when certain regions have been ice-free, maybe for quite a few years, to say, okay, you don't need ice-strengthened ships to go into this region or something. And I think we need to be very careful about accepting any changes like that, because you will always get pressure groups doing that. And one of the things that we were talking about this morning that we should have maybe done is to get more of the insurance companies to come here, because they tend to have a very kind of down-to-earth approach to what should be allowed and what shouldn't. Thank you.